The mountain air was thin, sharp with the scent of burned metal and gunpowder. Snow lay in patches along the rocky ridge, the ground torn apart by weeks of shelling. Below, in the valley, the Allied platoon huddled behind broken walls and sandbag lines, pinned beneath relentless machine gun fire. Their radios crackled with desperation, voices overlapping as officers shouted coordinates and called for reinforcements that felt impossibly far away. Every soldier knew time was their enemy. The longer they held, the fewer would remain standing when help finally arrived. High above them, unseen against the jagged silhouette of stone, a lone figure adjusted her scope. Valeria Dragunova lay flat on the ridge, her body pressed into the cold earth as though fused with it. She wore no insignia that glittered, nothing that would catch the eye. Her uniform was smeared in ash and grit, indistinguishable from the mountainside. Only her rifle betrayed her presence, a monstrous modified weapon, longer and heavier than anything carried by ordinary marksmen. It rested steady against her shoulder, the barrel wrapped with thermal shrouds to hide its heat. This was no ordinary rifle. It was an anti-material design, rebuilt to fire explosive-tipped rounds. To some, it was an impossible tool to master. To Valeria, it was the extension of her heartbeat. Her eyes, cold and patient, tracked movement in the valley. Enemy armor crawled forward, their turrets grinding as they sought angles on the trapped platoon. Soldiers in blackened fatigues advanced cautiously, confident their superior numbers would soon overwhelm the survivors below. She measured distances in silence, the numbers clicking in her mind like clockwork. There was no rush in her breathing, no tremor in her hands. She had learned discipline from the great shadows of history, names whispered in the halls of snipers, Lyudmila Pavlichenko, the Lady Death of Sevastopol, and Vasily Zaitsev, who turned Stalingrad into a graveyard for invaders. Valeria carried their spirit, though she bore her own path, one etched in scars and relentless training. Below, the platoon commander barked into the radio. His words were clipped with urgency. "Reinforcements ETA, 40 minutes. Hold your ground!" But everyone knew the truth. 40 minutes could be eternity under fire. Already their cover was crumbling, walls blasted apart with each impact. Men exchanged glances not of courage but of resignation. Their officers' words carried steel, but steel could not stop artillery shells. Valeria tightened her grip, exhaling softly. She was not officially part of their unit. Her orders had been different, her assignment shrouded in secrecy. Yet she had been watching, waiting, positioned where the ridge gave her perfect oversight of the valley. She knew the danger building below. If the enemy armor broke through, the Allied line would collapse in less than 10 minutes. Reinforcements would arrive to find nothing but silence and bodies. Her finger brushed the trigger guard, though she did not fire yet. Timing mattered more than impulse. A premature shot could reveal her location, and once her perch was known, counter-snipers or mortars would scour the ridge. She had one chance to shift the tide, and when she did, her rifle would not whisper. It would thunder across the mountains, a message of defiance no enemy could ignore. The enemy troops tightened their formation. A tank clattered forward, its heavy gun leveling toward the barricades below. Valeria's jaw clenched, her breath slowing even further. The call for reinforcements still echoed in the valley, but she already knew the truth. Help would not come in time. The ridge was hers, the decision hers. The moment loomed, pressing down like the mountain itself. She aligned her scope, the crosshairs steady over steel. And though no soldier below could see her, she was there, silent, waiting, about to prove that one rifle, in the hands of the right warrior, could halt an army. The valley was a cauldron of fire. Enemy artillery thundered against the stone ruins, collapsing walls that once shielded the pinned platoon. Dust and screams mingled as soldiers scrambled for cover, weapons clutched tight though their ammunition dwindled. The commander's voice rose above the chaos, rallying his men, but even he could not hide the tremor in his tone. Reinforcements were still far away, their delay stretching like a cruel shadow across every minute. The men and women trapped below began to understand the bitter truth. They would not live to see help arrive. From the ridge, Valeria Dragunova kept her cheek pressed to the cold stock of her rifle. Through her scope, she saw everything in sharp detail, the tank's barrel lowering toward the barricades. The trembling hand of a medic dragging a wounded comrade into cover, the advancing enemy squads tightening their noose. She felt the weight of silence before the storm, a silence that seemed to demand her choice. Then she squeezed the trigger. The first shot cracked like thunder, echoing across the mountains. A heartbeat later, the tank erupted in fire, its turret split open by the explosive round. Flames swallowed steel, and enemy troops scattered in shock. The platoon below looked upward instinctively, though they could not see her. Relief flickered on their soot-streaked faces, a brief breath of hope. But the reprieve lasted only moments. The enemy adapted quickly. Mortar tubes appeared on the ridges opposite, teams dragging them into position. Their commanders shouted orders, pointing toward the ridge where the shot had come from. Valeria's cover was compromised. She shifted position swiftly, crawling over jagged rock, her rifle dragging behind her like a beast chained at her side. Through her scope, she picked off the mortar crews one by one, explosive rounds tearing apart weapons before they could fire. But the effort cost her precious minutes, and in that time, the enemy pushed forward with renewed fury. Below, the Allied line wavered. A young corporal tried to run ammunition between positions but was caught in the open, riddled with bullets before he could reach cover. His scream carried across the battlefield, silencing the squad for an instant before rage consumed them. They fired wildly, determined to avenge him, though their desperation only revealed their positions. Enemy machine guns raked the ruins, mowing down 2 more soldiers who could not duck in time. Each loss carved into Valeria's chest like a blade. She could not save them all, but still she tried. Her scope found the gunners, her rounds exploding them into silence. Yet for every threat she destroyed, another seemed to rise from the smoke. Then came the unexpected strike. A hidden squad of enemy infiltrators crept up the ridge from her blind side, sent to eliminate the sniper who had turned the tide. Valeria sensed them only at the last second, the faint crunch of boots on gravel behind her. She rolled instinctively, pulling a sidearm from her vest. The first assailant lunged, knife flashing in the dim light, but she shot him point blank, the blast echoing too close to her ears. The others fired wildly, forcing her to duck low, rocks shattering around her. Her heart pounded. Yet she fought with the cold precision of training, her movements honed by years of brutal drills. She dropped 2 more before the last fled down the slope, wounded but alive, leaving blood in the snow. Breathless, Valeria dragged her rifle back into position. Her body ached, a fresh gash burned across her forearm, but she ignored it. Her eyes swept the valley once more. The platoon was nearly spent. Ammunition ran low. Medics had no supplies left. Their commander, bleeding from a wound to the leg, still barked orders, though his voice cracked with pain. Everywhere she looked, survival hung by a thread. And still, the enemy pressed forward, unwilling to yield despite their losses. Valeria chambered another round, her jaw tightening. The men below needed time. Time for reinforcements to arrive. Time for someone to stand between them and the advancing tide. If that meant she would burn herself out with every shot, then so be it. The ridge had become more than a perch. It was the thin line between life and death, and she was its guardian. Yet with every passing moment, she felt the enemy's noose tightening not only around the platoon, but around her as well. The question that hung in the cold air was no longer if reinforcements would arrive, but whether anyone would be alive to greet them. Smoke rolled low across the valley, thick with the bitter stench of burned fuel and shattered stone. The battlefield had gone quiet, not with peace but with exhaustion. Where hours earlier the air had roared with machine guns and mortars, now only scattered bursts echoed as the last of the enemy retreated into the mountains. Their assault had broken, not by the promised reinforcements, but by the relentless fire of one rifle on the ridge. Valeria Dragunova lowered her weapon, the barrel steaming in the cold air. Her cheek was raw from the scope, her body bruised from recoil, her arms heavy as though carved from stone. Dozens of casings littered the rock around her, each a story of survival for those still breathing below. She lay there for a moment, staring down into the valley, watching the remnants of the platoon staggering to their feet. Medics carried the wounded, officers regrouped the survivors, but the faces told the truth. The line between life and death had been paper-thin. Without her, it would have torn apart. The sound of engines grew in the distance. Finally, reinforcements rumbling in, their armored carriers climbing into the valley. Soldiers poured out, weapons ready, only to find the battlefield already secured, the enemy driven back. They saw the smoke trails, the destroyed tanks, the torn craters where explosive sniper rounds had struck with unearthly precision. And when their eyes lifted to the ridge, they caught a glimpse of the lone figure rising slowly from her position. Valeria did not wave. She did not seek acknowledgement. She simply slung her rifle over her shoulder and began her descent, every step a reminder of the wounds she carried. Blood had dried on her forearm. Her muscles screamed with fatigue, but she walked with the same steady determination as when she had first taken her position. The platoon watched her in silence as she approached, the commander leaning on a crutch fashioned from shattered wood. His lips parted, searching for words of gratitude, but none seemed enough. In the end, it was one of the youngest soldiers who broke the silence. His voice was hoarse, trembling with both grief and awe. "She saved us." The words spread quietly through the ranks, whispered from one survivor to the next. They did not know her name, not truly. They only knew the thunder of her rifle and the courage that had held the ridge when hope had failed. As reinforcements secured the valley, Valeria moved past them without pause. She was not there for medals or recognition. Her mission had been fulfilled long before the first shot was fired. She existed in the space between shadows, her victories recorded not in books but in the survival of those she guarded. For her, it was enough that they lived to fight another day. Night fell over the mountains, casting long shadows across the broken earth. Fires burned in the distance where wreckage still smoldered. The survivors huddled together, speaking in low tones of the Ridge sniper, comparing her to legends of old, Lyudmila Pavlichenko, who hunted invaders across ruined cities, and Vasily Zaitsev, who turned the ruins of Stalingrad into a graveyard for an empire. Valeria had joined their ranks, though her name might never be known outside these mountains. Far away, reports would credit reinforcements for the enemy's retreat. Commanders would file tidy summaries of the battle, omitting the lone figure on the ridge. Yet among the soldiers who had lived through the fire, the truth would remain carved into their hearts. They had been seconds from annihilation, and then the world had thundered with explosive fire from above. For Valeria, it was another mission, another ridge, another night where she gave everything to hold the line. But for those who had stared death in the eyes and survived, her presence was more than survival. It was legend. And long after the smoke cleared, when their voices spoke of that day, they would always end with the same quiet certainty. One rifle saved us all.